Hi guys, this is Amy from Honestly Invisibly Sick. This is my first intro video and I'm really excited. I wanted to start the first video off by telling you why I started my channel and a little bit about myself and my diagnosis story. Of course, the channel is about autoimmune diseases, and there are a lot out there for autoimmune diseases, but there aren't very many where people have multiple autoimmune diseases and really highlight that. So that's why I wanted to make this channel. I also wanted to make this channel to share my story. Maybe it would help somebody else, because my diagnosis story isn't your typical, I went to the doctor, I got my labs, I had some pain, and everything came back, and this is what it was. My diagnosis took a very long time. So that's why I wanted to share it. Also, I want to share because I'm hoping that I can inspire others to tell their story. On my channel, I really would like to get other people to come in and let me interview them so that their story can be told, because there's so many different autoimmune diseases out there, and not everybody's autoimmune disease fits the same mold. There is no mold for lupus. Not everybody's going to have the same symptoms. There's no mold for rheumatoid arthritis. Like, yeah, you're going to have joint pain, but there's also other things that go along with that that doesn't necessarily get highlighted. And I just want to be supportive. I want to start a supportive atmosphere. Maybe a forum where we can pray for one another and encourage one another when we're having a bad day, much like my day today. And yeah, that's why I started it. So the reason that I named my vlog or my YouTube channel Honestly Invisibly Sick is because the honestly part is that we've all been there, where other people don't know about autoimmune diseases and they don't understand how we suffer and how we can go from 1 minute of being fine and giddy, and then we could go, within the next hour and you're in a flare and you're so exhausted you can't even get up. So that's where the honesty comes in, or the honestly comes in, and the invisibly, because it's an autoimmune disease. Not everybody's autoimmune disease is visible. I do have psoriasis, so you can see the psoriasis on my skin, but most people wouldn't even know what it is. So other than that, there really isn't, you can't see joint pain unless you have like joint deformity. That can be seen, but most of our autoimmune diseases are invisible. And of course, the sick is for the chronically ill, which we are, because we have chronic autoimmune diseases. So to get in a little bit of my story, first off, I want to start off, before I tell my story, with a disclaimer: do not take medical advice off of the internet. This is just my story. It's not in any way to influence you in how to treat your autoimmune diseases. And yeah, how to get that out of the way. Now let's get into it. I have lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, fibromyalgia, chronic dry eye. I have not officially been diagnosed with Sjogren's syndrome, but I do have all of the signs and symptoms. I have other eye conditions, which I'm not going to get into in this video because it would take too long. I'm going to do a separate video of just my eye conditions because there are many. My diagnosis, like I said, my diagnosis story is not your typical story. I actually started having my eye symptoms first when I was 18 years old. I had iritis, and I continued to have that throughout my 20s, averaging about every 2 to 3 years, somewhere in there. And my eye doctor, my ophthalmologist, who's great, he kept telling me, I think that you have rheumatoid arthritis. And I was like, I'm young. I really didn't have any joint pain. I had back pain, which got really bad after I had my daughter, but I really didn't have significant joint pain at the time when he was telling me this. So I was like, I'm young, I don't have arthritis. And I really didn't know what rheumatoid arthritis was either, because I just assumed, like most people do, that arthritis is associated with the elderly, but that's not necessarily true. You can get rheumatoid arthritis at any age. Some children are born with arthritis, and that's a shock to some people because they don't know that it could happen like that, because it's not very common, or it's not very talked about. And hopefully by this channel we can do that. About 2014 was when my joint pain really started to kick in. I remember I had a bout again with my eye, with the iritis. It was in my right eye, and I went back to the ophthalmologist, and he said to me again, Amy, I think that you have rheumatoid arthritis. So I went to my doctor and I got my rheumatoid factor checked, which came back negative. But by this time my hands were throbbing really bad, especially in the mornings. I would wake up and they would be throbbing in the joint area. And I thought at first maybe this was because I slept with my hands balled up like this. So I would make sure that I would go to bed with my hands like this, so that they wouldn't, I was hoping that they wouldn't cramp up or wake up throbbing, to no avail. It actually got so bad. I remember at one point I had a really bad day, and I really couldn't feed myself that day. Every time that I would try to hold a spoon, my hand would cramp up and I would drop the spoon. So my wonderful, supportive husband had to feed me that day, and that was not a very good experience. Also around this time I kept getting like chronic fatigue. I felt like I had the flu, and I didn't really know that it was a flare, but I had the flu for, it was several weeks, and I remember there being a time where I couldn't get off the couch because I felt so sick. So I would just kind of go about my daily life and hurry up and get back to the couch as fast as I could because I needed rest. So that was in 2014. Then I had like a little lull where I wasn't as bad, which was the end of the flare, but I didn't know that. And so I decided to go back to school in August 2014. So I went to school for medical billing and coding, and that was the hardest year of my life. At the beginning of the year, I had a miscarriage, and then I had several flares. I had two flares where I couldn't move my shoulder. I couldn't even lift it up, but I was still going to school because I had to get it done. And I also had, of course, more bouts with my eye. I had trouble with dizziness, which at the time I thought was my sugar dropping low, but it was happening on the regular at school, and I didn't really understand what was going on. And then I had pleurisy, which is very painful. I had my first bout of pleurisy and costochondritis, all in that same year. But I managed to make it through school. I finished. I got my certification, which I had to go take a test for that, and I passed that. And then I had applied for a job at our local hospital, and I got that job. It took like 6 months to get in there. It was a lot of work. Sorry, my eye drains. We'll get into that in the eye video. But it's gonna be tearing up. So I started that job in January of 2016, and something was bothering my eye when I first started, and I wasn't really sure what it was. So I didn't get it treated right away because I didn't want to take time off of work because I had just started this job, and it was a really great job and I really loved it. and I didn't want to lose it, so I didn't take off. So my insurance kicked in, I think like a month or so. I don't remember if it was a month or 30 days. I'm not exactly sure. But as soon as it kicked in, I went and saw my ophthalmologist, and I told him this is what's going on with me. And I got diagnosed with keratitis, which I had never had before. So that's inflammation of the cornea, and iritis, I should have explained that. That is inflammation of the iris part of your eye, which is the color part. The cornea is the clear part. It's like an overlayment over your iris and your pupil. So I had the keratitis, and I think I got scleritis at the same time, which is the inflammation of the white of your eyes, the sclera. So I had gotten inflammation of that as well, and it wasn't really going away. So I had went and seen. Oh, it wasn't really going away, but my ophthalmologist also saw something else in my eye, and he thought that I had optic neuritis, so he sent me to the neurologist. Well, the neurologist did all the tests, did my MRI, everything came back negative. The one thing that he did do, though, was he had infused steroids, because it was a little bit of time before I could get my MRI because of my insurance. So he was really convinced that this is what it was. Because I couldn't see color out of my right eye as I usually could. It was really dull. So he went and infused in my veins steroids over a portion of 3 days, or a course of 3 days. And this actually helped. My eye cleared up during this time. I did have a little bit of a weird flare to it. I think it flared up my fibromyalgia, but at the time I didn't know that. But it flared up all the muscles in my neck, and it was really hard to move my neck. But I got over that within 3 days of being off of the steroids, but it really did help with my eye. I continued to have bouts with my eye. I think this was when we were figuring out that I had dry eye, but he was still trying to treat it with over-the-counter things, and it wasn't really working. So the eye situation was still going on, and my ophthalmologist thought, well, maybe you need to see a rheumatologist. Maybe it's time for you to really go and see a rheumatologist and figure it out. And my primary doctor felt the same, and he sent me up to the rheumatologist. I went to the rheumatologist. I had all of my blood work done. Everything came back negative, other than my SED rate was really high, and my ANA was a couple points high, but he wasn't really concerned about that. So he diagnosed me with fibromyalgia. So he kind of said that that was the sum of my whole symptoms, but to me, it didn't make sense. Everything didn't add up, because by this time, I was already having I already had the significant joint pain for years, or for a couple years there. And I was getting, which I had never had this happen to me before, but I was getting seriously stiff, like stiff in my feet. I would have trouble getting my feet going in the morning. They would be shuffling across the floor. I couldn't lift them up. Getting out of bed for my feet to touch the floor to walk to the bathroom was absolutely excruciating. It took so long to get to the bathroom to get my feet to where they weren't as tender. It did go away a little bit after I would walk around on it, but those first initial steps in the morning were really, really rough, just getting to the bathroom. And in the middle of the night, if I woke up in the middle of the night, it was the same thing. It was really painful to get to the bed. My back had become super stiff. I was having trouble getting out of bed in the morning. I was having trouble getting up from sitting positions. And I sat all day at work because I worked on the computer. So every time I went to get up, it took a long time to get out of the chair. It was very stiff, painfully stiff, not just like stiff, like it was painfully stiff. I would have trouble sometimes not being able to go all the way up with my back. So there was sometimes that I was walking around the hospital and I was a little bit over because I couldn't get all the way up, or it would take like a long time, like 10 minutes or so, before I could get all the way up to that standing position. So I wasn't really I wasn't really sold that it was fibromyalgia. I knew that I did have a lot of the symptoms of fibromyalgia, but I wasn't so sure that that was the only thing going on. So I went and saw another rheumatologist. And when I went and saw him, I had another symptom that came up, of where whenever I would go to sit down, it felt like I was sitting on a knife. So I went and saw him. Of course, he looked over all the blood work, and he pulled some more of his own blood work, and he did an MRI. He diagnosed me. Of course, he said I had the fibromyalgia, and he also diagnosed me with sacroiliitis, which is inflammation of the sacrum, and that's what was causing the pain whenever I would go to sit down. It literally was like sitting on a knife. But he said at this time that my blood work wasn't really showing anything. He didn't think that the ANA was significantly elevated to lead him either way. So I said, okay, well, I got fibromyalgia, so I went back to my original rheumatologist, and I did, well, before I went back to my original rheumatologist, things had gotten really bad at work. As I had told you guys, I was having a lot of trouble getting around, and I had stepped down to part-time, hoping that that would make a difference and maybe not be as much stress on my back, and maybe I wouldn't be as stiff. Well, it didn't exactly work out the way that I wanted to, and I was getting progressively worse. And with my job, they wanted me to step back up to full-time when busy season kicked in, which where I live, we're seasonal. I live in the South, and we have people that come from up north down to our state, and that's our busy season, so the summer is normally slow. So during the summer, I was part-time, and it was getting close to busy time. I think we had like 2 more months before busy season really kicked in. So I regretfully, well, not regret, I don't regret it because it was the right thing to do at the time, but I was very scared, and I didn't want to lose my job because I really loved my job, and I liked the people that I worked with, and it was a really big accomplishment to land that job. So I was really not wanting to let it go, but I did because it was the best thing for me, and it was the best thing for the company, because I was in and out anyway with doctor's appointments all the time, trying to figure out what's going on and to treat all the different ailments that kept coming up. I think I had pleurisy a couple times too where I was working, so I wasn't functioning on a 100% level, so they really weren't getting my best. So I decided to just step down, and I had prayed about it, really prayed about it before I did it, because I want to make sure that I was doing the right thing, because I had to lose my health insurance that I had through my job. But it was the right thing to do, and I had went back to my rheumatologist, and he had put me on amitriptyline to try for the fibromyalgia. I was not able to stay on the amitriptyline. It did help, and I had a lot of energy, but it caused an adverse effect on my ankles. My ankles would swell, and I couldn't lift up my ankles, like they were stiff, and I had to shuffle my feet everywhere I went because they just wouldn't, my ankles would not work. And also I had the dry eye, and the medicine was making it worse than what it already was. So I went and saw my ophthalmologist, and I told him what was going on, and he said, you got to get off this medication. It's really drying your eyes out, even worse than they already are. So I had to wean off of that medication, and I just didn't take anything for a while. I just dealt with the flares as they would come. By then I knew I was flaring. I have a time in the winter, well, it's getting close to fall, and we're getting close to it right now. Between September and October, depending on the weather, I usually get where my joint pain comes back in my hands and my feet, and they throb. So I was dealing with that, and I was dealing with the flares. I did physical therapy right after I stopped working, hoping that they would get me back. So because I had left it at work where I could come back if I got better. So I was hoping that this was really going to help me, but it did not. She actually had said to me the physical therapist said that you will never go back to full time, because I was so, I don't want to say crippled, but had a significant limp because of my joints that were inflamed in my right foot, and my back was really messed up. I couldn't stand up all the way, and the leg having a limp was really messing with my back, so she had put me on a cane, and it just wasn't progressing. So I stopped the physical therapy, and I tried to do it on my own because it was really expensive, and I had just lost my health insurance, so I was like, I gotta get moving on my own. It did work out. Using the cane, there was a time when I did not flare, or the joints in my feet had stopped flaring, and I was able to get off of the cane. And I got a good like 8 months like that where I was off of the cane. And then I had to go back on it because, you know, flares come. So I flared up again and I had to go back on the cane. And then I think I had another time, a good stretch where I didn't have to be on it. And then in 2018, I had to go back on the cane, mainly for my back, because I was back to the limp and my back was just hurting so bad, and I wasn't able to get around like I wanted to. So the cane helped alleviate the back pain that was caused by the limp. So I had went back on the cane, and I had really felt like I wanted to try again to see if we could find out what was going on. So I went and saw another rheumatologist in August of 2018, and she pulled all my blood work again, and this time my ANA was more elevated, and my SED rate was elevated. So she said to me that she thought, because I was just thinking arthritis, she said that she thought that I had lupus. And it wasn't a great moment because I know what lupus is. I had a family member that had it, and I had done a lot of research on it. Not just because I had a family member on it, but because there was a time when I was working at the hospital that I had thought that that's what it was, because I knew there was a difference between the lights in the hospital. Everybody knows that the lights in the hospital use fluorescent lights. And I would notice that I would be fine on the weekends, but when I would go back into work and be in the lights again, that I would start to feel like I had the flu. So I really had thought that there might be a chance that I had lupus, and I had really researched it, but I wasn't really expecting it because the summer before that I had gotten diagnosed with psoriasis because I had a rash on my leg, and I went to the dermatologist. He biopsied it and said, you have psoriasis. So I was thinking psoriatic arthritis. I really wasn't thinking lupus at that time. And she diagnosed me with a lupus. She diagnosed me with rheumatoid arthritis, and she also confirmed the fibromyalgia. So for this, she started methotrexate was the first thing that we tried. But because I think I forgot to mention that in the beginning, I have Hidradenitis Suppurativa, and because I have this, it caused the methotrexate caused the Hidradenitis Suppurativa to flare. So I had to come off of the methotrexate, and then we tried Plaquenil, which you don't normally take when you have psoriasis because it can make your psoriasis worse, but my psoriasis isn't that bad. It's very mild. So I was able to, and have been able to, take the Plaquenil. And I also take meloxicam. The dosage depends on the flare that I'm going through. And I am off of the cane. I've been off the cane for since March, so maybe about six months, something like that. So I've been off of it for a while. I was really shocked this year because I didn't think that the joint pain would come back around September, October. but it has. The pain in my joints and my joints in my hands and my feet, that has come back. But other than that, I'm doing really good. I'm happy to finally know what it was, because this was like a huge span of time. Like, I was 19 when I started the journey with my eyes, and I'm now 34. So that was a very long time for it to be drawn out of not knowing what was going on. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you like this video, subscribe. If you want to leave a comment down below. If you need some support, if you're going through something, just comment down below. I will be happy to give you support. It's hard, especially when you know that something's wrong with you and it's not adding up with the doctors, which is what was wrong with me, and you go through a point where you think, maybe I'm crazy, but you're not. Things happen. Sometimes the doctor doesn't always catch up with what's going on in our body, and lupus is very hard to get diagnosed. So is rheumatoid arthritis if you don't fit that mold. Not everybody has a positive rheumatoid factor. I still don't. Anytime I get it done, I still don't have a positive rheumatoid factor. So not everybody fits the mold, and I surely did not fit the mold. And my next video will probably be about my eyes. If you guys are interested, let me know. If you have any video ideas, just leave it down below. Thanks. Have a blessed day.